when you stop and think about, well, what do we really have problems with mitochondrial function? And the answer to that question is, yeah, we have major problems with mitochondrial function. Yes. And so when you even look at the literature for kids with ADHD, adolescents, adults, it's pretty clear at this point that mitochondrial dysfunction is associated with the pathology of ADHD. So in theory, something like red light therapy that comes in and helps to support that mitochondrial function could be expected to have a positive effect on the condition.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating topic that harnesses the power of light to promote that healing and that wellness. And we're going to be talking about red light therapy. It's a therapy that's been gaining traction in recent years, and for good reason. I've been wanting to get someone onto the podcast to really talk about it. So I was very, very excited to come across our guest that I'm going to be introducing in 1 second. But what exactly is it? How can it benefit our kiddos, especially those with ADHD? Now, to guide us through this kind of illuminating discussion, we have a very, very special guest joining us, Dr. Genevieve Newton. She is a seasoned researcher and educator in the field of nutritional sciences with her wealth of knowledge and passion for healing using the gifts of the natural world. Dr. Newton is here to shed the light. I'm sure that many people say that joke when they're introducing you on the science really behind the red light therapy and its potential applications for kids' health. So guys, listeners, whether you're curious about how red light therapy works, its impact on ADHD, or how to choose the red light therapy product for your family, you're definitely in for a treat. So we're going to welcome our guest, Dr. Genevieve Newton, to the Soaring Child. Hi, Genevieve.
Right. Hi, Dana. Thank you for having me, and hi, everyone.
I'm really, really excited to talk about this really interesting topic. So
it's an interesting topic.
Yes. Let's just start from the beginning. What is it? What's red light therapy?
Okay, yeah, that you have to start there because it's a bit elusive to a lot of people.
Yes.
Very popular topic right now, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. So we need to start off with talking about what sunlight actually is. Mm-hmm. And when we look at sunlight, so let's say we've got, a range of wavelengths that comprise this light that comes from our sun. You have a part of it that is visible, and that would have at one end your violet color, and that would be a specific wavelength. It's going to be shorter in wavelength. And then as you get through those colors of the rainbow and you get to red at the other end, those wavelengths are getting longer. As you move past that red, you get into that infrared spectrum, and those wavelengths get even longer. So the closer you are to red, you have near infrared. And then as you get farther, you have far infrared. So far infrared would be your saunas. Now, if you're on the other end near the violet and you go to shorter wavelengths, you have ultraviolet. And that's where you've got your UVA, your UVB rays. Those are the ones that when they hit our skin, they activate the melanin and they change the skin color, but they also stimulate the synthesis of vitamin D. Okay, so that's the context of what comes from our sun. Now, amazingly, when you look at the distribution of those wavelengths, we see a majority of them are coming from the red and the near infrared. So comprising a lot of that visible spectrum and that spectrum that's just beyond that we don't see, but we feel it as heat. So near infrared light and red light wavelengths, that's what we're talking about with red light therapy. So red light therapy specifically would be the application of red, near infrared, or both red and near infrared light for the purpose of influencing biology. So that's red light therapy.
Wow. That was probably the best explanation and the easiest one to understand that I've ever heard. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I think that was just a perfect explanation. So how does it work? How does red light therapy work?
Yes. Okay. So red light therapy is going to work on us on a cellular level. And so we're going to get a little bit into some science here. And I just would like you to challenge me if you would like some clarification. I'll try to keep it pretty simple.
Okay.
So if we get into the cell, and if we were to look at a cross section of the cell under a microscope, what you would see is that it's loaded with mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells that produce energy, and our cellular energy is in the form of ATP. Okay, that's like our energy currency, and it does everything. And it's funny because when I was in school, going all the way back to high school, and I think everybody, probably even now in grade schools, the kids are learning about mitochondria. And you look at the picture of the cell and you see a couple of mitochondria there. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I actually saw a cross section of this under a microscope, and I realized that the cells are bursting with mitochondria. There are so many mitochondria. And so, I really got a new appreciation for the importance of these and the prevalence of them in our cells. So when you look at how that energy is produced, you have something called the electron transport chain. And basically they call it a chain because it kind of works in sequence. And you've got these things that are proteins. And what they do is they carry out a bunch of reactions. And at the end of it, you have this ATP that's produced. So a lot of things have to go right in order for that to happen. And it turns out that with red light therapy, if you put the red wavelength and the near infrared wavelength into the cell and it penetrates into the mitochondria, hits that electron transport chain, there are molecules in there that are photosensitive and they get activated and they start to do their job more efficiently. And when they do their job more efficiently, now you have more energy that's produced and you have a cell that is able to function properly. And so, when you stop and think about, well, what do we really have problems with mitochondrial function? And the answer to that question is, yeah, we have major problems with mitochondrial function. Yes. And so when you even look at the literature for kids with ADHD, adolescents, adults, it's pretty clear at this point that mitochondrial dysfunction is associated with the pathology of ADHD. So in theory, something like red light therapy that comes in and helps to support that mitochondrial function could be expected to have a positive effect on the condition. And this is one of the reasons too why something like exercise can be helpful for kids with ADHD, but especially nutrition, because when you change that diet over to a healthy plant whole foods diet, you're getting micronutrients that are also needed for that electron transport chain to function properly. And so this mitochondrial functionality is really a key central primary role of red light therapy. And it's also one of the reasons why red light therapy is capable of doing and helping so many different conditions. Because I go into everything as a scientist, I go into everything as a skeptic. And so when I started hearing about red light therapy several years ago, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to keep an open mind, but how can something do so much? And then you get into the science of it and you understand the foundational mechanisms of it. And it's like, well, that's why, because it's literally foundational to our physical health.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's how it works.
We are basically made up of, you'd probably be able to tell me how many cells are in our body.
Oh, trillions and trillions.
Trillions and trillions. We are walking cells. That's what we are.
We are walking cells. Yeah.
And so if
we're full of water,
that is, and then and the cells. And so if you think about it, if we've got trillions of cells that all have these hundreds and hundreds of mitochondria in it, and if those mitochondria are not functioning well, then we need to do, we're going to be sick. We're going to be suffering. Our brain's not going to be able to function. So makes total sense. Can you just go, when I work with kids, we look at oxidative stress. We talk about oxidative stress a lot. And so I'd like you to touch a little bit on that. One of the big things that I see, one of the tests that we actually do with the kids that we work with is something called a cryptopyrrole test. And cryptopyrroles, if you've got these elevations of these cryptopyrroles in your urine, it results in a dramatic deficiency of zinc and B6. But it is known that cryptopyrrole levels rise as a result of part genetics, part oxidative stress. And so I see probably about 40% of the kids that I work with have these elevated cryptopyrrole levels. So they are severely suffering from oxidative stress. So can you just talk a little bit about that and how that relates to what you just explained?
Exactly. So that relates to the mitochondria. So the mitochondria, in the process of carrying out these reactions that are part of the electron transport chain, there are reactive oxygen species that are produced. It's normal. And so the problem comes when it gets imbalanced. And that's when you get the situation where you have oxidative stress. And so you have dietary things that you can do, come in with antioxidants and reduce the oxidative stress. You have exercise, and you have all these systems in your body that are designed to help to counteract that oxidative stress. But when those mitochondria become dysfunctional and they aren't working properly, and it doesn't have to be severe dysfunction either, you can end up with a state in which that you are shifted and tending towards oxidative stress. So the scenario where you have the red light therapy and the activity on the mitochondria and how that acts on oxidative stress is a bit complicated. So I'm not going to get into it. Mm-hmm. But if we look at on the end of it, so getting out of the details, the end result is that there is an overall decrease in the oxidative stress, along with that improvement in the mitochondrial function. And one thing that I came across when I was doing some reading about ADHD and mitochondrial function was that there's been some research suggesting that there's actually an inherited mitochondrial DNA that is associated with the presence of the disorder, and it is consistent with what you're seeing with that 40% or so. So there are definitely kids that are dealing with this predisposition on a mitochondrial level towards having this, and so you have to really work hard to deal with that with external and internal kind of activities.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And I love that you're a science geek. Sorry to say that to you, that you're
oh, I am very much so.
Yeah, but I call my husband a geek. He's in the tech industry, and I call him a geek all the time. So it's a term of endearment. It's not meant to be.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how it helps. What aspects of our health does red light therapy affect? Obviously we've talked about the technical, the scientific parts of it, but how would this impact ADHD?
Yeah, so we can look at this from 3 levels. Okay, so let's start with the first one. And this one is probably the most profound, but the second one is going to be pretty profound too. The first one is the brain. Mm-hmm. So at the level of the brain, if we apply red and near infrared light to the head, there are some research studies with adults that have Alzheimer's disease that have applied it intranasally. So actually putting that up the nose. It doesn't look like, thankfully, that you have to do that in order to get the benefit. You can definitely put it on the head and apply it, especially getting this forehead coverage. But what's going to happen there is that the mitochondria, when they are stimulated by the red and near infrared light, and you get this upregulation of the energy production, downstream of that, we target 3 things that are foundational to ADHD, as well as other brain disorders. So these are neuroinflammation, right? That's inflammation of the brain, oxidative stress, which we've already talked about, and brain metabolism. So again, all of these things are tying into this mitochondrial function. There does appear to be some things, especially related to inflammation, that are independent of mitochondrial function, but we kind of look at that mitochondrial function as being primary, and then what comes after that sort of being secondary. But regardless, it's those 3 foundational pathologies, the neuroinflammation, the oxidative stress, and the metabolism, that we're looking at as being kind of the most helpful thing for kids or adults or adolescents with ADHD. Now, the second one is our gut. And this is where things get kind of interesting, because again, we're talking about effects on mitochondria, decreases in inflammation, improvement of oxidative stress, and corrections of this altered metabolism. But now we're not only dealing with the individual and their intestinal cells, we're actually dealing with the microbiome too. And research has shown that those bacteria, they also respond. They have these photosensitive pigments and things that are in their cells, and they also respond to the red light therapy. And so some studies have shown just this positive shift towards a more favorable microbiome composition. And so we've got that double whammy of hitting the host intestinal cells and also the bacterial cells that are in there. And then we have a third thing with the gut, and that's the gut-brain axis. So as soon as we have this improvement in function and the microbiome is healthier, then the gut and the brain can communicate more effectively. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not really sure which one's more important. It's kind of hard to say. And there's actually been some interesting research with adults with either Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, where they found that if you apply light to the gut and the brain, kind of, it doesn't have to be at the exact same time, but it can be, but that the treatment applies to both locations, that there's an even better outcome. And so kind of that dual target is kind of maybe going to end up being your gold standard when we get into doing enough research on validating this. Okay, now the third aspect of health that red light therapy can help with ADHD would be circadian rhythm regulation. And this is a big one. It's a big one, but it's a very different mechanism than what we were talking about before with the mitochondria. So circadian rhythm, I'm sure all of your listeners know, it's like our sleep-wake cycle. And everybody who has a child with ADHD, I have one as well, knows that they tend to be more wakeful at night, right? There's often this kind of shift, a circadian shift towards having more energy later in the day. And this is something that has been observed in a number of research studies. So if we look at the triggers or the signals, the biological signals for that sleep-wake cycle, what you want to see is in the morning, you have exposure to bright light, and particularly the blue wavelength in bright light stimulates you to become alert. Melatonin levels go way down, cortisol goes up, you're ready for the day. And then let's picture a scenario where we didn't have all of this artificial lighting and we were, living outside in kind of a natural environment. What would happen as you shifted into the evening? The wavelength distribution in light would change greatly. The blue light would go down and you would have the yellows and then the ambers and then the reds and then darkness. And that turns out to be our biological signal to go to bed. And it triggers the release of melatonin, the cortisol goes down, and then things are good. And so we have this horrible situation that so many people are unaware of and participating in without even knowing it, whereby we're exposing our kids to bright lights at night in the home. They're watching television, they're on their devices, which release all of this blue light into the eyes, which have these signaling pathways to the brain. And it's shocking what you see when you look at the research studies, and kids are so sensitive to this. Yeah. So exposure to the bright light at night and the blue light shifts that circadian rhythm forward by about 2 hours. And so if you're already dealing with somebody who has a phase shift of their circadian rhythm forward, and now you're adding that on top of it, you have a real problem on your hands, and it's an easy fix. And so obviously you need to get the lights, the exposure to the blue technology really down at night. And if they need to use it, they can wear the blue light blocking glasses for sure. Yeah. But one thing that we're realizing that can be very effective is actually using red light as ambient lighting in the evening. And so you get rid of your usual incandescent bulbs. You use an appropriate light source, which actually it's not a white light that's covered in a red film. It's actually the red wavelength, right? So you can buy them online. There are some specifically designed products, but that can help to just shift the child, the adolescent, the adult into a place where they're primed biologically to actually go to bed at night. And that works wonders, especially when you're dealing with the adolescents who have that increased need for sleep and all of these, things going on in their body that push them towards sleeping later anyways. Yeah. So those are the three things: brain, gut, circadian rhythm.
Fascinating. It
really is, isn't it?
But you have this passion for this, and the way that you explain it is so wonderful, and so just you can understand it, and it makes total sense. So thank you for that. So lots of benefits, and everything that you discussed is everything that I teach and preach. That gut-brain connection is super critical. Making sure the gut is functioning well, but even, the benefits to the brain directly, is remarkable. So how would you use red light therapy, with kids with ADHD? You've mentioned a couple things, at nighttime, but how would you use it?
Yeah. So I think I've already described pretty well what you would do with the lighting at night. One thing to comment on that would be that there's some devices now that will transition, and they will go from like a yellow, amber, orangish to red, and they'll give you that kind of shift in the light wavelengths, and that can be very helpful. But if we're talking about how to use the actual red light therapy that you can apply to the brain or to the gut, okay, let's talk about each one of those in sequence. So brain, I mentioned that ideally you would be delivering that light directly to the head. So you can do that using a few different types of devices. There are companies that make helmets. The helmets are a little bit uncomfortable. They're hard, and for a kid who has a smaller head, that can be a little bit of a challenge. Then there are other companies that make a flexible type of hat. We'll call it a red light therapy hat. Those will be more adjustable, and so they can be positioned around a tinier head, a bigger head, and they will deliver. Ideally, you want them to deliver both red and near infrared light. So that's kind of your best approach at this point to delivering the light to the head, is to really get it in that direct contact, particularly on the forehead area, where you've got a lot of blood that's flowing through the forehead and going through into the brain vasculature. So that's the brain part of it. For the gut, it's easy. You apply the light directly to the gut. And so I'm going to show you, I know not everybody is going to be watching this, so I'll sort of describe a couple of different products that we make in particular to give you an example of what you can look for if you're looking for a product. So we have the red light therapy hat. And so this has just been closed up. It's in its folded shape right now. And then when you turn it on, the lights go on. Now, we've designed this so it has actually 2 wavelengths of near infrared light, and that's different than our other products. And we put this additional wavelength in here because it's deeper penetrating. So it's going to get that double whammy of near infrared light into the head. And that's unfortunately makes the product a little bit more expensive than the other ones as well. But this is a red light helmet.
And that looks that actually looks really light and comfortable. Yeah, it
is. Yeah. So I think one of the nice things about buying red light therapy products, if you invest in a good quality product, everyone in the family can use it. So I have a range of different things. I have 2 kids who are athletes. They're using them all the time for muscle strains, back pain, something hurts. They're using them for their skin because they're teenagers and they have acne. I use this red light helmet every day when I get up in the morning because I have a family history of dementia. And so I just put it on and the first thing, I make my tea, I get breakfast ready, and then it's done. It's a 20-minute timer that goes off. So that's specifically for the head. Now, for the gut, you can get something like a wrap so this is our extra long wrap. So for the listeners, it's actually it would probably be about 2.5 feet long, and maybe about 8 inches wide. And you just position it around the abdomen and secure it with the Velcro strap. And it's very easy to use. Now, one that would be better sized for children would be a smaller, more rectangular size.
Yep.
And we do make one of those as well. But now we're going to get into. I want to kind of give your listeners some ideas about how we could be creative in terms of recognizing that people maybe don't want to buy 2 products, right? So if you're looking at, what am I going to invest in? What's the best bang for my buck if I'm going to just buy one product to address both the head and brain health as well as the gut health? So we can get creative with both of these products. Now I'll show you, for those that are listening, you won't be able to see this, but all of our products are on our website. I know you're going to link to that, Dane.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to those into the show notes below.
So the red light therapy hat opens up and it's flat. And so I can actually position this on my abdomen and cover, and I end up getting a benefit of getting all the lymphatic vessels in the thorax as well, which helps with immune function. So you can do that with the red light therapy hat. So you can kind of get a double whammy there. And then for the rectangular wraps, so what you can do with these is position it just over the scalp of the forehead of the child. Ideally, it would be, maybe it's a quiet time and they're resting on the couch and watching TV. So it's not something obtrusive. And then you just get it on there. They can still move around a little bit. You can use Velcro to kind of wrap it around the head. So neither, one of them is going to be perfect for one body part and not for the other. And unfortunately, there's no one product that is perfect for both. But you can get creative with them. You definitely can. Well,
I love the idea of that hat, and that I think that for kids would be amazing because it just looks really comfortable and very easy.
It is very comfortable
to walk around. And look, at the end of the day, you know, we're not talking about thousands of dollars here. It's just a few $100s, a couple of $100 even, depending on which one you get. But I can see that both of them would be so beneficial, and you can use them for years, I presume.
You absolutely can. Yeah. I can't remember the number of, it's in our manual, the expected number of battery recharges that you get, but it's very high.
Yeah. And so talk about how that works. So like, you know, what would you recommend for a kid to be using on a daily basis, or is it every day? Is it every second day? How long?
Yeah, very good questions. Okay, so when you're looking for a product, I think the main question that you want to ask yourself is, how do you want to use it, right? Do you want it to fit directly over the head? Do you want it to fit, you know, directly over the abdomen? Do you need the child to be able to move around when they're using it so that it's not obtrusive? Because red light therapy devices do come in 3 different formats. So one is these wireless wraps that we make. Another is wraps that have wires that plug into an electrical outlet. And the third one is a panel. Have you seen the red light panels?
Definitely seen the panels.
Lots have seen them. Yeah.
Can't move around with those ones.
That is the thing. So ideally, panels, in a way, panels can hit on all of these 3 things that we were talking about. They can be used for ambient lighting in a room. You can sit in front of it with your eyes closed and direct the light at the face and the head. You can stand in front of it and direct the light to the abdomen. However, it requires that you stay stationary, that you close your eyes, and that you're spending a fair bit of time there. And so we know that for a lot of our kiddos, that's probably not going to be the best option.
Not realistic.
But yeah, right. But those devices are there, and I did want to tell people about them. But in terms of the wireless devices, they have a battery, a lithium-ion battery that you'll get between 3 and 4 charges each. So you just have to make sure that you have it charged and ready to go when you would like to use it. All of ours have timers for 20 minutes, and we found, by looking at the scientific literature, 20 minutes for head, 20 minutes for gut. That's an ideal length of time. And in terms of frequency, so once a day is perfect, but you can also see benefits in the literature 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, 7 times a week. So I would recommend anything between 3 and 7. What we don't recommend is doubling up and doing the same body part twice in one day. But what you can do is, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes on the gut. That's fine.
Could you do the head and the gut at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And they're both very easy to, I think when I put them on and I'm going about my daily life in the house, there's really nothing that I can't do. So for a kid, there's really not, like, they can go and, you're not going to play in water, but you can go around the house and you'll forget that it's on, and then the timer will go off. The light goes off. You don't have to think about it, and it comes off, and you're done for the day.
Amazing. I'm like going out and I'm going out and buying myself some of your things right now, because I can tell you, I do have a red light device, and honestly, we just don't use it enough because it's not practical.
It's a panel.
It's a panel. It's not practical to sit there and do it. For me, obviously, it's a little bit more, but for the kids, they don't want to sit down for 20 minutes with their eyes closed. Now, one thing that comes to mind, and I know that, a lot of families would think about this. Back in the day when I was younger, I used to go to the tanning bed and I used to lie on that tanning bed. Yeah. We now know generally not safe.
Exactly.
So is red light therapy safe? Is it, are there any things that we need to be concerned about in using it?
Right. So what you're describing, it brings us back to the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about that sunlight spectrum. And so the light that's below the violet, that's our ultraviolet light. That's the light wavelength that creates that change in the skin color and that you're having the exposure in the tanning bed from. It's also the form of light that has the ability to increase your susceptibility, increase your risk of skin cancer, right? So when we're talking about red and near infrared light, though, it doesn't have those same effects. Now, there have been over 3,000 studies at this point done on red light therapy. It's been being researched for decades. So it's actually quite surprising that is only getting into the mainstream. But the reason for that, and I will get back to your question about safety, the reason that it's become mainstream is that for the first few decades, the only light source was lasers, and lasers need to be done in a medical setting. Most of the time, they have risks of deep heating because they're so intense. It's a very intense form of light. And then subsequent to that, people started experimenting with LED lights because they started being able to create LED lights that made these different wavelengths. And when the studies were done that compared the laser to the LED head to head, it was found that, oh my goodness, the LED lights, which are so much cheaper, totally portable, we can get them to people in their houses, well, they work just as well. There are going to be some conditions that laser would be more effective for, but that will be your doctor doing that it would be a physiotherapist or a medical doctor would be doing that in their office. So that was what gave us that transition into having all these products now. But in terms of safety, so of those 3,000 plus studies, a few hundred of them have been done in humans, and then another, probably a couple of thousand were done in animal studies, which would be the initial places where you would look for safety. And then in the human studies, it's remarkable. It's basically the situation is if you can spend 20 minutes out in the sun, you can spend 20 minutes with a red light therapy device. But I have to put a caveat in that. And the caveat is that your device should not be high intensity. So if your device is high intensity, then you'll need to be concerned about heating, possibly burns if it's very high intensity, and the treatment times will need to be limited to only a few minutes usually. So when we were doing our research and development for these products, we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's the optimal intensity. So intensity, basically, it's measured in milliwatts per centimeter squared. So how much power, how much energy is going in per cubic centimeter of your skin. And so after looking at, so many studies, we realized that these high intensity devices that many companies are marketing as being so great because they're so powerful, they're actually not the devices that in the scientific research are generating all of these positive effects. So when we developed our products, we mimicked the intensity of the sun. And so that's why I can make this statement that if you can spend 20 minutes out in the sun, you can spend 20 minutes with a low to moderate intensity device. The only people who would need to be concerned would be people then who are light sensitive. So some people have photosensitivity, and then some people take medication that makes them photosensitive. So if that's you, it doesn't mean that you can't use red light therapy. It just means that you wouldn't start at 20 minutes. You would set your timer for 2 minutes the first time you used it. If everything was okay, the next day you'd set it for 4. And that way you would just kind of make sure that you increased your exposure slowly and figured out where your comfortable level was. But in terms of safety, that's really the only consideration. The other thing to think about with safety is the eyes and getting the light into the eyes. So if you were using a panel, you wouldn't want to sit directly in front of it and stare into the lights. You'd want to keep your eyes closed or wear goggles. But for the wraps, it's not an issue because the wraps go directly against the skin and the light doesn't really come out the sides. You can see it, you can see that it's on, but you don't have to worry about that safety issue with the eye exposure.
Well, Genevieve, I just have to say thank you so much for this enlightening literally episode. I can tell you what I'm going to be doing straight after we finish today, and that is going and getting myself one of these wraps. It's renewed my excitement for red light therapy. We are going to drop all the links to where you can find more about Genevieve's company and the wraps that she talked about today. If listeners that are listening on podcast platforms want to actually see what she showed us, we will be releasing this podcast on YouTube as well. We will drop that in the show notes. But Genevieve, thank you so much today for...
Oh, you're welcome, Dana. It's my pleasure.
And your experience and your passion.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would definitely say if anybody's interested in learning more about red light therapy, our passion, as much as our products, is education. And so we are regularly sharing information on our website. We've got blogs that, I write a lot of them, a lot of the time. And we also have a free 30-minute course for people who, maybe wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into the science. And I can give you the link to put that on your website as well, in case anyone's interested.
Fantastic. No, I am sure I will even be taking that 30-minute course as well.
Thanks.
But thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, my pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.